For those of you who don't know, I used to be a speaker in the topics of psychology, sociology, philosophy, politics, and such. And now I'm focused entirely on the arts. Why is that that I made that transition? Those previously mentioned topics are still very important to me, but I realized that as time went on, learning and education and intelligence have become less and less important to people who are becoming increasingly more concerned with entertainment and short form entertainment. So even if I were to make my lectures entertaining, they were long form and people just wouldn't stick with them. So I made the move into the arts because the arts are just as important to me as the aforementioned topics. And why is this transition logical? Well, because the arts are very connected to these aforementioned topics. You see, art is not just mindless entertainment. It is, of course, a very intellectual thing, as you may know. And it is not just a philosophical thing, but it is very political and psychological and sociological too. So I figured it would perhaps actually be an even better medium for me to convey my messages to the public through. And in order to prove this point, I want you to imagine the symbol of the swastika from the Nazi Party. You can picture that very clearly in your mind, can't you? With the red background and everything. And it is just such a powerful image and symbol. And why is that? Well, you may be thinking to yourself, well, of course, it's because it symbolizes a party led by a man who had his party murder, 11 to 17 million people. I mean, that was more than anyone else in history, right? Is that why it is such a memorable and powerful symbol? I mean, that can't be it, actually, because there were other leaders throughout history who actually had more people murdered than Hitler and his Nazi party. If he murdered 11 to 17 million, well, King Leopold II is up there at 10 to 15. But then exceeding Hitler was Joseph Stalin, who had 20 to 30 million killed. Genghis Khan had 40 or even more killed. And Mao Zedong had 40 to 80 million killed. So it can't be that Hitler had the most people in history killed. And can you recall the symbol of Mao Zedong or Genghis Khan or Joseph Stalin? I can't. I don't know if I've ever seen it, and if I have, I don't recall it. So it can't be about the most people being killed, right? That makes this symbol memorable. And you may be thinking, well, it's a very unique symbol. And it's easy to remember, I mean, it's a simple, easy to remember, unique symbol. But that can't be the case because it's not unique. It was actually used for thousands of years before Hitler by Buddhism and Hinduism. You see, I actually used to be a Hindu, and I attended a temple that used the swastika that was part of a lineage that dates back 15,000 years. So are you familiar with the symbol in its Hindu and Buddhist use? I imagine you probably aren't, right? So you know that it's not unique. Hitler actually co-opted it or took it from other religions that had been using it since pretty much time immemorial. And no one even knows or remembers the Hindu or Buddhist use of it. So what was it that made Hitler's Nazi swastika so much more memorable than the Hindu and Buddhist versions of it? And what made his symbol so much more memorable than the symbols employed by Stalin, Genghis Khan, and Mao Zedong? Well, it was Hitler's art. You see, Hitler was an artist. And for his Nazi party propaganda, he used the very modern art form of the Art Deco style. So that is why his imagery is so bold and creates such an impression on you. Art Deco style, it was very progressive and forward thinking and stylish for the time, and it made his propaganda so much more powerful than most propaganda you have ever seen from any other political party. And a lot of communist artwork is actually very progressive and stylish too. That is one of the very powerful strengths of communists, is that they tend to either be artists themselves or be in bed with artists. They are artistic thinking. So they create very impressionable propaganda because of their use of artwork. And art is a very psychological thing. And thus, it can be very politically powerful and, like I said, very sociologically influential. This can be done not just with a good symbol from a religion being turned into an evil one for political purposes, but it can actually happen in reverse, where you have an evil political symbol that gets turned into a good religious symbol, such as the cross in Christianity, which was a torture device in the ancient Holy Roman Empire. I'm using the word holy with a little air quote of my hand because I don't consider them to be holy, although I feel that way pretty much about every religion these days. Which then was co-opted by Christianity and turned into what was seen as a positive symbol of redemption and salvation and other such things, and has been used in, I guess we wouldn't call it religious propaganda, we could call it brainwashing, I guess, making people look upon this torture device as a symbol of beauty and spiritual goodness and blessings and auspiciousness and such. And if you are a Christian, you can picture your favorite rendition of the cross quite readily in your mind and probably gain a lot of positive feelings from that image. All right, so you can understand the psychological impact of art and symbology and such. And it also, for you, if you're a spiritual person, has a spiritual impact, which is, a sort of subset of psychology. And if you're not a religious person, then think about the national anthem of your country, which you could probably hear in your mind in a very clear and distinct manner, and it probably causes certain feelings for you. If you love your country, you're going to have feelings of love and other positive emotions. If you hate your country, then you're going to have feelings of hate and negative emotions. And so that right there shows the political power and psychological power of the art of sound and music. And if you really don't care about politics and your country's culture, as many people these days don't, just imagine your favorite song right now, which you could probably hear in your mind. And I'll give you a moment just to hear the melody. And notice how you can hear your favorite song quite easily, and it will then produce a certain emotional state in you and give you these very nice positive feelings. There's just such psychological power, and it grows over time with repetition and exposure. So imagine back when you were a child and you had your first favorite musical artist and your first favorite song by them. Just imagine that song right now. And so notice how even after so much time, that song is still with you, to the point where you can just pull it up in your mind and listen to it in your mind. And it will then give you all of these same feelings. Like when you hear it in your mind and you really listen in, you could probably picture one of the times when you were young, where you were listening to it and exactly how it felt. You could probably imagine the sights you were seeing around you, the feeling of being in your body there. There is such psychological power to not only art, but especially music, which is why I am focused almost entirely on music as my art form these days. And there's also something to be said about movies, which are what I consider to be the most ultimate art form because of the fact that they are a combination of the four major art forms, which are visual art, writing / storytelling, performance art, and sound / music, right? So when you combine these four into a movie, it has a certain synergistic effect when you bring these four together, right? And then you are using the art of filmmaking to create scenes in such a way that they will play out in a way that you cannot experience in real life, right? So you can slow it down into slow motion. You can over dramatize certain moments, not just by slowing them down, but making the characters play them out in a more dramatic fashion, having the actors be acting in a dramatic way, playing music that will then play on your emotions, as I have just showed you it will, and then even using effects, right? So I've found in my life as a adult man, it's difficult for me to cry even when I really ought to. Like sometimes if a family member dies or a friend dies, I won't cry, at least not right away, and I know I really should be. I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with me? Am I a bad person? Am I a sociopath? Why aren't I not crying? But then later, when I'm watching a movie that is over dramatizing the death of a family member or friend of the main character, then it will play on my emotions to the degree that I get teary eyed. And then I'll start thinking of, the one that I lost. And then I will finally experience the emotions in the way that makes me cry as I should have. And I'm like, why is it that movies make me cry, but real life doesn't? Well, that is the power of art, right? It is just so psychologically and politically powerful. It can cause these things because, with movies, like I said, there's a synergy of 4 different art forms coming together to be so much more powerful than they are individually. They are more than the sum of their parts. So movies are an extremely powerful art form, even more than any one of their individual arts. And music is my personal favorite. I mean, movies are something that today are being sort of corrupted and dumbed down and diluted by modern woke feminist Hollywood and the evil corporations running it that are just trying to reduce the artistic and intellectual integrity and messages and make them more superficial and shallow and vapid and just profit driven. So it's harder these days to find good movies. And when you do watch a movie, you're investing a lot of time. 90 plus minutes is a lot of time these days when there's so much else to do, right? So I'm not watching as many movies as I used to, unfortunately. And when I do, they're harder to find good ones. I have to spend a lot of time looking. And then, even so, half of the movies I watch are no good these days, which didn't used to be the case. So I'm focused more on music, which is, of course, shorter and thus requires less investment of time and energy to engage with, and is extremely intellectually and emotionally stimulating in such a short period of time, right? And is in that sense more entertaining. So that's why I've chosen to be a musician and not a filmmaker. Also, it's cheaper to make music than film. To make one movie, you need like at least $10,000 to $100,000, if not more. The music is very entertaining, but it is not just entertainment, or it shouldn't just be. It doesn't have to be. There are certainly some musicians out there or musical performers who are just entertainers and not really what I would call artists. And if you want to know what the distinction is, click my link below for my free lesson on analyzing and evaluating music as an art form. But you see, I don't want to just be an entertainer because entertainment is mindless, right? It doesn't require thought for you to be entertained, right? Art is intellectual. And thus, while it can be entertaining, it is supposed to be intellectually stimulating. Its purpose is intellectual stimulation. And that is also what I consider to be my purpose and why I have chosen to be an artist and not just an entertainer, now that I'm no longer lecturing on psychology, sociology, and politics and philosophy. So art sort of helps me to fulfill the same purpose. And when you are constantly getting that intellectual stimulation from art and other sources, ideally, what you will get over time is intellectual development and increases in intelligence. But on the other hand, what will happen when you are indulging in mindless entertainment more and more over long periods of time? You get the opposite, which is brain rot, which is what we are seeing with a lot of people today who are too focused on short form mindless entertainment, and they are losing certain mental faculties and functions so that they can literally no longer perform as a human being is supposed to psychologically anymore. Some of these people can no longer, for instance, communicate as a human being ought to. They can no longer construct sentences. Some of these people can't even speak in a proper manner. They will literally just be silent most of the time because their brain does not function in that way anymore. They're basically being zombified by brain rot due to too much mindless entertainment. So there's a danger to mindless entertainment that is almost worse than being addicted to a hardcore drug. I mean, the level of brain rot is just astounding. So mindless entertainment used to be seen as something that was harmless when, for instance, parents would make sure their children weren't watching too much of it. But when you don't limit it, and you also don't get any intellectual stimulation from the arts and other intellectual activities, this is exactly what happens. This is the danger that our parents used to warn us about back in the 1900s. Don't watch too much TV. It's going to rot your brain. It's going to make you stupid. When the TV came out, my mom's uncle used to call it the idiot box. He knew, and many other people like him knew right away, that it wasn't going to make people think as much as reading books or listening to stories on the radio where you had to imagine the story taking place in your mind. So it was forcing your brain to do work. Or, of course, listening to a lecture that would make you think. So people used to know that these things had a certain inherent mental risk, and they would limit the intake of these mindless entertainments. And the people who were producing TV shows and movies would then often try to be more artistic and intellectual and intelligent about it. And that's why we ended up getting smart sitcoms such as Seinfeld, or extremely artistic and intellectual shows such as The Sopranos, or movies that were just masterpieces, works of art, such as The Godfather and Schindler's List. And, I could go on. I've actually already done a whole lecture on film if you want to check that out. The link is below. But the point is that you shouldn't underestimate the power of art, psychologically, politically, or otherwise. Art can be entertaining enough. It is also extremely intellectually stimulating and will help you to develop your mind over time if you engage in it. Whereas mindless entertainment is just plain stupid. It may be fun, but it's going to rot your brain, and there's nothing fun about that. That's going to be a very painful experience that causes you to suffer in the long run. And also, you just shouldn't want to be that type of person, right? Don't be an NPC or a Philistine. Indulge in the arts and engage your mind, and disengage from anything that seems like mindless entertainment. So make good choices about how you entertain yourself. Try to entertain yourself with things that are more artistic. And if you want to learn more about the arts, like I said, check the links below. And also, if you're looking for some very mentally stimulating music or other audio forms of artwork, you can check out the tracks that I have put out for you here on my channel by going to my videos tab. I do music of just about every genre and style, and a few other types of art forms as well, of different styles. There's literally something there for everyone, and I work really hard to make artwork that is going to be extremely entertaining, but even more so intellectually stimulating, that will make you both think and feel, and will have a powerful impact and has some sort of significant message, and is also, like I said, going to be very entertaining. So check all of that stuff out, and I will see you there.